I need to get this off my chest because what happened 6 months ago at my engagement party has been eating at me every single day. And now it's finally time to talk about what I've been planning since that night. So here's the setup. I'm 31. I've been with Yvette for 2 years. Met her at a mutual friend's barbecue. She seemed great at first. We clicked, started dating. The whole thing felt pretty natural. Her parents, Edwin and Nellie, always seemed a bit off to me from the start, though. Like they were sizing me up every time I came around. They'd ask pointed questions about my job, my car, where I lived, but I figured that's just what protective parents do, right? I work in property management, which sounds boring as hell to most people, so I never really elaborated much about what I actually do. I drive a 2003 Toyota Camry because it runs fine, and I see no point in replacing something that works. I live in a decent apartment, nothing fancy, keep my life pretty simple. Yvette and I got engaged last February. She wanted a big engagement party, said her parents insisted on throwing it, inviting everyone they knew. I thought it was excessive for an engagement party, but whatever, if it made her happy. They rented out this huge event space, invited like 200 people, most of whom I'd never met. Her parents' friends, their business associates, extended family, basically turned it into this massive production. The party started fine. People were drinking, eating, making small talk. I was standing near the gift table when Edwin suddenly grabbed the microphone from the DJ booth. He started tapping it, getting everyone's attention, and I figured he was going to do a nice toast or something. Instead, he launched into this speech about how his daughter Yvette is his princess, how she deserves the absolute best in life, how she's always been destined for luxury and success. Then he pointed right at me and said, "This broke loser will never be able to support my princess the way she deserves. He drives a 2003 car while she should be riding in Ferraris. What kind of pathetic joke is this engagement?" Everyone in that room turned to stare at me. Some people looked uncomfortable, others were whispering to each other, a few were actually laughing. He kept going, talking about how I work some dead-end job, how I'll never amount to anything, how embarrassing it is that his daughter is settling for someone like me. I looked at Yvette, expecting her to say something, to defend me, to at least look uncomfortable. She was smiling, actually smiling and nodding along like her dad was making perfect sense. She leaned over to whisper something to her friends Ashley and Carla who were standing next to her, and all three of them laughed. That's when I knew this wasn't just Edwin being a drunk jerk. This was planned. Nellie, her mother, grabbed the mic next and added that they were only there for the free food, not to celebrate this sham engagement. She said something about how they'd tried to talk Yvette out of this mistake, but she insisted on going through with it anyway. The whole room was dead silent except for a few people who were clearly enjoying the drama. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, clenched my fists under the table, and let them finish their little performance. Part of me wanted to walk out right then, but another part of me, the part that's been getting stronger since that night, told me to stay calm and wait. I'd figure out what to do later. After the party, Yvette acted like nothing happened. She was going on about how the party was beautiful, how much fun everyone had, asking if I saw how gorgeous the centerpieces were. I asked her about what her parents said, and she just shrugged, said they were probably just nervous about losing their little girl, that they'd warm up to me eventually. She said I was being too sensitive about it. That's when I started paying more attention to other things. How she'd been pushing for us to combine our bank accounts. How she kept talking about buying a bigger house together, something in the $2 million range, and assuming I'd somehow finance it. How she'd drop hints about expensive vacations and designer shopping trips we'd take after we were married. She never actually asked about my finances directly, just made assumptions and plans based on what she thought I could provide. I started going through her Instagram DMs one night when she left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. Found a conversation with Ashley from 3 weeks before the engagement party. Ashley was asking if she was sure about marrying me, given my financial situation. And Yvette responded that the wedding ring was just the beginning. That once they were legally married, she'd have access to everything. And if it didn't work out, she'd at least get a decent settlement in the divorce. Ashley sent back a string of laughing emojis. I kept scrolling. Found messages with her mother Nellie discussing how they needed to push me harder to prove I could provide for Yvette properly. Nellie suggested the public humiliation at the engagement party as a test to see how I'd react, to see if I'd scramble to prove myself or just accept that I wasn't good enough. Yvette said it was a brilliant idea. So here's what they don't know about me, and what I've been sitting on for the past 6 months while I've been planning exactly how to handle this. I don't just work in property management. I own a property management company. I started buying rental properties when I was 23, fixing them up, renting them out, using the income to buy more properties. I've been doing this for 8 years. I currently own 47 residential properties across 3 states. My net worth is somewhere around $8 million. The property management company I run manages not just my properties, but about 200 others for various investors. And here's the best part. Edwin and Nellie, they rent their house. From me. They don't know it because it's under my company's name. They deal with my property manager, Harvey. And they've never made the connection. They've been living in one of my properties for the past 4 years, paying me rent every single month while talking about what a broke loser I am. Her younger brother Carla also rents an apartment from one of my properties. Same situation, has no idea I own it. I've been collecting rent from this family while they've been planning to use me as their daughter's meal ticket. And the irony is so perfect it almost makes me laugh. After I found those messages, I didn't confront Yvette. I didn't break up with her immediately. I started documenting everything instead. Every conversation about money, every assumption she made, every time her parents made snide comments about my finances. I saved screenshots of all her messages. I consulted with my lawyer about the best way to handle this situation without doing anything illegal or stupid. The wedding was supposed to be in August. I let Yvette keep planning it. Let her parents keep paying deposits on venues and caterers. Let them all keep thinking I was just going to go along with this whole scheme. I showed up to dress fittings and tastings and smiled. Through every passive-aggressive comment about whether I could afford to contribute anything meaningful to the wedding costs. 3 weeks ago, I sent formal notices of lease non-renewal to both Edwin and Nellie's property and to Carla's apartment. They're on month-to-month leases now since their annual leases expired. The notices came from my property management company, standard business correspondence. Nothing personal, completely legal. They have 60 days to vacate per the terms of their lease agreements. Yesterday was day 45 of that 60-day notice period. That's when my phone started going crazy. 31 missed calls, 48 text messages, voice messages from Edwin, from Nellie, from Yvette, from Carla, all of them absolutely losing it. Turns out they finally figured out who owns their properties. Update 1. Alright, so the comments on my last post have been wild. Shout out to everyone who called this situation perfectly, and to the person who said I should charge them back rent for emotional damages. That made me laugh for like 10 minutes straight. So yeah, where was I? Right, 31 calls, 48 texts, voice messages from the whole family absolutely melting down. I didn't answer any of them immediately. I wanted to let them sweat for a bit, let it really sink in that the guy they'd been publicly humiliating for months is actually their landlord. That the broke loser driving the 2003 Camry owns the roofs over their heads. The first voice message was from Edwin, and I could hear the panic in his voice even though he was trying to sound authoritative. He was demanding I call him back immediately to discuss this misunderstanding about the lease renewals. Said there must be some kind of administrative error because they've been model tenants for 4 years. A misunderstanding. Like I accidentally sent eviction notices to my own future in-laws by mistake. Nellie left 3 voice messages in a row, each one progressively more frantic. The first one was her trying to sound sweet, saying surely we could work this out like family. The second one was her crying about how they couldn't possibly find a new place in 15 days. The third one was her screaming about how I was trying to make them homeless and what kind of monster does that to his fiance's parents. Yvette's messages were something else entirely. The first few were confused, asking why my company was sending notices to her parents and brother. Then, I guess someone explained the whole situation to her because the next batch of messages were her calling me every name in the book, saying I'd been lying to her our entire relationship, that I'd deceived her about who I really was. The irony was apparently lost on her. I let them all stew for about 6 hours while I was at work handling actual business. Then, around 7 p.m. on Wednesday, I drove over to the house Edwin and Nellie rent from me. My house, technically. I parked my 2003 Camry right in their driveway and knocked on the door. Edwin opened it, and I could see he was trying to decide whether to be angry or conciliatory. He went with angry first, started going off about how I'd been hiding my real financial situation, how I'd made them think I was some nobody when apparently I'm some kind of real estate mogul. How dare I play games with their daughter's future like this? I just stood there and let him finish. When he finally ran out of steam, I asked him if he was done. Then I told him exactly what I thought about his little speech at the engagement party, how he'd humiliated me in front of 200 people, how he'd called me a pathetic joke while I was literally paying his mortgage through the rent he gives me every month, how the entire family had been treating me like garbage while living off my property. Nellie came to the door then and immediately started with the waterworks. She was going on about how they didn't know, how if they'd known they never would have said those things, how we're going to be family, and surely I wouldn't throw family out on the street. I reminded her that she'd specifically said at the engagement party that she was only there for the free food, not to celebrate a sham engagement. That didn't sound very family-oriented to me. That's when Yvette showed up. She must have been texting with her parents and rushed over when she realized I was there. She came storming up the driveway and got right in my face, demanding to know why I'd lied to her about everything. I asked her what exactly I'd lied about. She said I'd pretended to be poor, that I'd let her think I was just some regular guy with a boring job when I'm actually wealthy. I told her I never said I was poor. I just never corrected her assumptions. She'd decided based on my car and my apartment and my quiet lifestyle that I must be broke, and I let her believe that because I wanted to see who she really was. Turns out she's exactly who I thought she was after that engagement party. She switched tactics then, got all soft and apologetic, started saying how they'd made a mistake, how her parents were just worried about her future, how everyone says dumb things when they're stressed about their kids growing up. She put her hand on my arm and said we could get past this, that now that everyone knew the truth, we could start fresh. She said she loved me and the money didn't matter. I pulled up the screenshots on my phone, showed her the Instagram messages with Ashley about getting access to everything once we were married and securing a good settlement in the divorce. Showed her the messages with her mother planning the public humiliation. Asked her if this looked like love to me. Her face went completely blank for a second, then she started claiming those messages were taken out of context, that she was just venting to her friends, that everyone jokes about stuff like that. She said I was being ridiculous for taking private conversations and using them against her. Edwin jumped back in then, said I had no right to go through his daughter's private messages. I told him I had every right to protect myself from someone who was actively planning to use me. Then, I laid out exactly what was going to happen. The lease non-renewal stands. They have 15 days left to vacate the property. I'll be refunding their security deposit per the lease terms, assuming there's no damage when they move out. This is a business decision, nothing personal. They can find another place to live and we can all move on with our lives. Nellie completely lost it at this point, started screaming about how I can't do this, how they'll take me to court, how they have rights as tenants. I very calmly explained that I've already consulted with my lawyer and everything I'm doing is completely legal. They're on month-to-month leases. I've given them proper notice. There's absolutely nothing they can do legally to stay. Edwin tried a different approach. Said he'd be willing to work something out, maybe sign a new lease with better terms. Maybe we could negotiate. I told him there's nothing to negotiate. I don't want them as tenants anymore. Simple as that. That's when Yvette played what she clearly thought was her ace card. She said if I don't let her parents stay in the house, she'll tell everyone the truth about me. She'll go to all our mutual friends, her entire social circle, everyone at her work, and tell them I'm a con artist who tricked her into a relationship by pretending to be poor. She'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person I really am. I looked at her and said, go ahead. Tell them. Tell them I'm secretly successful and own properties and run a business. Tell them their daughter tried to marry me thinking I was broke so she could divorce me and take half. See which one of us comes out of that story looking worse. She didn't have a response to that. Before I left, Carla showed up too. Her brother, the one who rents the apartment from my other property. He started in on me about how I can't kick out his whole family, about how he's done nothing wrong. Why am I punishing him for what his parents did? I told him his lease renewal is up in 3 months, and I won't be offering him a new one either. He can start looking for a new place now. I drove home and immediately started getting more messages. Ashley was texting me, Yvette's friend from the Instagram conversations, asking if we could talk about this reasonably. I ignored her. Then Carla, Yvette's other friend who was laughing at the engagement party, sent me a long message about how everyone makes mistakes and I'm being too harsh. Deleted it without reading the whole thing. But here's where it gets really interesting and why I'm making this update now instead of waiting. This morning, I got a call from the venue where our wedding was supposed to be held in August. The event coordinator wanted to confirm some details about the ceremony space. I told her there wasn't going to be a wedding. She got quiet for a second, then said she understood, but she needed to let me know that Edwin had called them yesterday, asking about transferring the contract into a different name. He wanted to know if they could keep the same date but for a different couple. I asked her what she meant by a different couple. She said Edwin had mentioned something about his daughter still wanting to use the venue for her wedding day, just with a different groom. She thought it was odd enough that she wanted to check with me directly. So apparently, while they're scrambling to find new housing and dealing with me breaking up with Yvette, Edwin is already trying to line up the wedding venue for his daughter to marry someone else. Like they've already got a backup plan in motion. I called Harvey, my property manager, who's been the main contact for Edwin and Nellie's rental, and asked him to pull all their maintenance requests from the past 4 years. Turns out they've been requesting upgrades and renovations pretty regularly, acting like entitled homeowners rather than tenants. Last year, they demanded I install central air conditioning because the summer heat was too much for Nellie's migraines. The year before that, they insisted on new kitchen appliances because The old ones didn't match Nellie's decorating vision. They've been treating my property like their personal renovation project on my dime. I've been sitting on this information all day trying to figure out my next move. The wedding venue thing really got under my skin. Like they're so confident Yvette can just swap me out for someone else who actually meets their financial standards. Part of me wants to just walk away now. I've made my point. They know who I really am. The engagement is off. They're losing their housing. That should be enough. But another part of me remembers standing at that engagement party while 200 people laughed at me being called a pathetic joke. Remembers Yvette smiling and nodding along. Remembers all those Instagram messages about divorce settlements. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with my lawyer to discuss something else I've been thinking about. I'll update again soon. Update 2. Okay, so the comments asking about the backup groom situation have been blowing up my inbox. Yes, I found out who it is. No, you're not going to believe this. I met with my lawyer on Friday morning at his office downtown. We went over the lease situations, confirmed everything I'm doing is completely legal, discussed the renovation costs Edwin and Nellie have been racking up over the years. My lawyer suggested I could potentially pursue them for unauthorized alterations to the property if they installed anything without proper approval. I've got documentation of every request they made and every upgrade I paid for because they insisted it was necessary. While we were talking, my phone kept buzzing. I ignored it during the meeting, but when I got back to my car, I had 14 new messages. Most were from Yvette, a few from Edwin, one from someone I didn't recognize. I opened that one first because I was curious. It was from a guy named Harvey. Not my property manager Harvey, different Harvey. The message said he was Yvette's friend from college, and he'd heard about our breakup and wanted to reach out because there were some things I should know about the situation. I was immediately suspicious because why would some random college friend of Yvette's be contacting me? But I texted back asking what he meant. He sent me a long message explaining that he and Yvette had been talking a lot lately, that he'd always had feelings for her, and that Edwin had actually reached out to him 2 weeks ago, suggesting he might want to reconnect with Yvette since her engagement was falling apart. 2 weeks ago. That was before the eviction notices even went out. Edwin was already setting up a backup plan before they even knew I owned their properties. I called this Harvey guy. We talked for about 30 minutes, and he was surprisingly honest about everything. Turns out Edwin has been playing matchmaker between him and Yvette for the past month. Harvey comes from a wealthy family, works in finance, drives a Porsche, the whole package that Edwin apparently thinks his daughter deserves. Harvey said Edwin had told him that Yvette's relationship with me was on the rocks, that we were probably going to split up anyway, that now would be a perfect time for him to step in and pursue her properly. But here's the thing that really got me. Harvey said Yvette had been receptive to his advances even before our engagement was officially called off. They'd been meeting for lunch, going to art galleries together, having long phone conversations about their future. He thought she'd already broken up with me until he saw her Instagram post from last week where she was still wearing the engagement ring and referring to me as her fiancé. When he confronted her about it, she told him she was just keeping up appearances until after she secured some financial arrangements. She told him I was being difficult about money, and she needed to make sure certain things were settled before she could fully commit to moving on. Harvey said that made him uncomfortable because it felt like she was using me for something, which is why he decided to reach out and warn me. I asked him why he was telling me all this instead of just backing off from Yvette entirely. He said he's conflicted because he genuinely has feelings for her, but he's starting to see patterns in her behavior that concern him. He wanted to know if I thought Yvette was actually in love with him or if he was just the next mark in her gold-digging operation. I told him that was something he'd have to figure out for himself, but based on my experience, Yvette is very good at making men feel special while simultaneously planning her exit strategy. After I hung up with Harvey, I drove straight to Yvette's apartment. We'd been living separately the entire time we were engaged because she said she wanted to maintain some independence before marriage. Now I'm wondering if she wanted separate living arrangements, so I couldn't see what she was really doing. I knocked on her door around 2 p.m. on Friday. She opened it and immediately tried to close it again when she saw me, but I put my foot in the doorway. I told her we needed to talk about Harvey. Her face went completely white. She asked me what I meant, and I said I knew everything. About the lunches, the gallery visits, the phone calls, the conversations about their future together while she was still engaged to me. She tried to deny it at first, said Harvey was just a friend, that I was being paranoid and jealous. I pulled up the text messages Harvey had sent me, showed her the part where he quoted things she'd specifically said to him about waiting to end our engagement until after financial arrangements were settled. She couldn't deny that. Then she switched to offense, started accusing me of spying on her, of invading her privacy, of being controlling and obsessive. She said if I'd just been honest about my money from the beginning, none of this would have happened. She said I created this whole situation by lying about who I was, and now I was trying to punish her for making normal backup plans in case the relationship didn't work out. I asked her how long she'd been planning to leave me. She didn't answer. I asked her when she decided that Harvey was a better option than me. Still no answer. Then I asked her if she'd ever actually loved me or if I was always just a placeholder until someone better came along. That's when she finally got honest with me. She said she did love me at first, that when we started dating she thought we had a real connection. But then her parents started asking questions about my finances, and she started noticing things that didn't add up to the lifestyle she wanted. She said she thought maybe love would be enough, but the more time passed, the more she realized she wanted security and luxury, not some middle-class existence with a guy who drives a 15-year-old car. She said when Edwin contacted Harvey and reminded her that there were men out there who could give her the life she deserved, she started questioning whether she was settling for less than she was worth. She said she was going to tell me eventually, but then the whole property ownership thing came out and now everything was ruined anyway, so what did it matter? I told her it mattered because she'd been actively pursuing another man while wearing my engagement ring. It mattered because she and her parents had humiliated me in front of 200 people while secretly knowing she was already planning her next relationship. It mattered because she'd been lying to my face for months while I'd just been living my life honestly. She said I was one to talk about honesty given that I'd hidden my entire financial situation from her. I reminded her that I never lied about anything. I just didn't volunteer information about my assets and income because I wanted to know she loved me for who I was, not what I had. She said that was manipulation, and I said it was self-protection, and we argued in circles for another 20 minutes. Finally, I told her I came to let her know that I'd spoken with the wedding venue. They'd informed me about Edwin's call trying to transfer the contract, and I wanted to make it clear that I'd be handling all cancellations personally. If she wanted to marry Harvey in August, she and her parents would need to book their own venue on their own dime, because they weren't using the one that was reserved under my name. Yvette said I was being petty and vindictive. I said I was being practical. Then she tried a different approach. She sat down on her couch and started crying, saying she'd made mistakes but we could still fix this. She said we could go to counseling, work through the trust issues, start over with complete honesty. She said she'd call off whatever she had going with Harvey, she'd tell her parents to back off. We could move forward as a team. I asked her if she really thought I'd believe that after everything. She said people deserve second chances, that our relationship was worth fighting for. I told her our relationship ended the moment she smiled and nodded, while her father called me a pathetic joke at our engagement party. Everything since then has just been me figuring out how to protect myself from her family's schemes. She got angry again, said I was going to regret this, said Harvey would give her everything I'd withheld, said her parents were right about me being a broke loser because only someone with a broke mindset would drive a car from 2003 when they could afford better, said I was so obsessed with testing people and proving points that I'd probably die alone. I left her apartment and went straight to the property where Carla rents. Her brother. I wanted to talk to him directly about his lease situation because he'd been sending me increasingly frantic messages about how unfair it was to punish him for his parents' actions. I knocked on his door and he let me in, clearly hoping I was there to tell him his lease would be renewed after all. We sat at his kitchen table and he immediately started pleading his case. He said he'd always been polite to me, had never participated in the engagement party humiliation, had tried to stay neutral in the family drama. He said he couldn't afford to move right now because he'd just bought a new car and his savings were depleted. He asked if there was any way I could extend his lease, maybe month to month for a while, until he got back on his feet financially. I told him his lease expires in 3 months, and I wouldn't be renewing it because I don't want to maintain any business relationships with Yvette's family. He said that was unfair to hold him responsible for his sister's choices. I asked him if he thought it was fair that his parents publicly humiliated me while I was literally paying their housing costs every month. He didn't have an answer for that. Then he said something interesting. He said Edwin and Nellie have been arguing constantly since the eviction notice came. They've been fighting about money, about where they're going to live, about whose fault it is that they're in this situation. Nellie has been blaming Edwin for the engagement party speech, saying if he'd just kept his mouth shut, none of this would have happened. Edwin has been insisting he was just looking out for his daughter's best interests. Carla also told me that Yvette and Edwin have been house hunting together for the past week, looking at places in the price range that Edwin thinks I should be paying for given my actual net worth. They're looking at houses that cost 2 or 3 times what I charge them in rent, acting like I'm going to cave and buy Yvette a house to prove I'm worthy of marrying her. I asked Carla if he seriously thought that was a reasonable expectation. He shrugged and said his family has always had expensive taste and they don't really understand the concept of living within their means. He said that's actually why he can't afford to move right now. because he grew up watching his parents spend beyond their means, and he developed the same habits. Before I left, I told Carla I'd be conducting a final walkthrough of Edwin and Nellie's property next week before they move out. If there's any damage beyond normal wear and tear, or if any of the renovations they insisted on were done without proper permits, I'd be deducting costs from their security deposit and potentially pursuing them for additional damages. He said I should expect problems because Nellie had hired contractors to do work on the kitchen and bathrooms without going through the property management company. I spent the weekend going through my records of all the maintenance and renovation requests from both properties. Turns out Edwin and Nellie have cost me about $47,000 in upgrades over 4 years. The central air conditioning alone was $18,000. They'd claimed it was a medical necessity for Nellie's migraines and implied they might pursue legal action if I didn't install it. I have emails from Edwin threatening to file complaints with the housing authority over unsafe living conditions if I didn't make the improvements they wanted. This morning, Monday, I got a text from Edwin asking if we could meet to discuss a compromise. He said he's willing to acknowledge that the engagement party was inappropriate and that they'd misjudged me. He said if I'd agree to let them stay in the house, he'd ensure that Yvette gives Harvey a definitive answer about their relationship one way or another, like he thinks he has any leverage left to negotiate with. I haven't responded yet. I've got 9 days until Edwin and Nellie need to be out of the property, and I'm honestly curious to see what they try next. Final update. All right, folks, this is it. The conclusion to this absolute mess. And for everyone who said this family would try every manipulation tactic in the book before actually moving out, you were absolutely right. So Edwin's text about meeting to discuss a compromise? I ignored it for 2 days. Didn't respond, didn't acknowledge it, just let him sit there wondering if I'd even seen it. On Wednesday, 3 days before the Friday move-out deadline, he showed up at my office, actually tracked down where I work and walked right into the building asking for me by name. My assistant came to my office and told me there was a man in the lobby insisting he needed to speak with me urgently about a property matter. I knew exactly who it was. I took my time finishing what I was working on, made him wait about 25 minutes, then went down to the lobby. Edwin was pacing near the front desk, looking stressed. When he saw me, he immediately launched into this whole speech about how we needed to talk like reasonable adults. I told him we could talk in the parking lot because I wasn't bringing this conversation into my workplace. We walked outside and stood next to my Camry, which he kept glancing at like he couldn't believe I actually chose to drive it. He started with the apology angle, said he'd been out of line at the engagement party, that he'd had too much to drink, that he let his protective instincts for his daughter override his common sense. He said he'd been worried about Yvette's future and he overreacted when he thought she was marrying someone who couldn't provide for her properly. He said now that he knows the truth about my financial situation, he realizes he was completely wrong and he wants to make amends. I asked him how exactly he planned to make amends. He said he was willing to sign a longer lease term at the house, maybe 3 years with an option to renew. He'd agree to a rent increase if that's what I wanted. He'd even be willing to pay for some of the renovation costs he'd requested over the years. He said they loved that house, and they'd been model tenants. Aside from some misunderstandings about maintenance, I told him the lease is ending on Friday, and there's nothing he can offer me that would change my mind. He said I was making an emotional decision instead of a business decision. I said no. The business decision is not maintaining relationships with people who have shown they'll use and manipulate me. He said I was being petty and vindictive over one drunken speech. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots of Yvette's Instagram messages with Ashley. The ones about getting access to everything once they were married and securing a divorce settlement. I asked him if he knew his daughter had been planning to use me from the beginning. He went quiet for a minute, then said that was just girl talk, that young women say things to their friends they don't really mean. I asked him if he really believed that. He said Yvette loved me, and she just got confused when he and Nellie started questioning the relationship. He admitted that maybe they'd put too much pressure on her about finances and security. He said they came from a background where money was always tight, and they didn't want their daughter to struggle the way they had. I told him I understood financial anxiety, but that didn't give them the right to publicly humiliate someone or manipulate their daughter into viewing relationships as business transactions. He said I was right. They'd made mistakes. But couldn't we move past this for everyone's sake? Then he played what he clearly thought was his trump card. He said if I let them stay in the house, he'd make sure Yvette completely cut off contact with Harvey. He'd tell her she needed to focus on fixing things with me, that Harvey was a distraction, that our relationship was worth saving. He said he could convince her to give me another chance if I gave his family another chance. I actually laughed at that, told him I had zero interest in fixing things with Yvette. That ship sailed the moment she smiled and nodded while he called me a pathetic joke. He said I was throwing away a good woman over pride. I said no. I was protecting myself from a family of manipulators and gold diggers. Edwin's whole demeanor changed then. He dropped the apologetic routine and got aggressive. Started saying I was making a huge mistake, that I was going to regret treating his family this way. Said Yvette was going to marry Harvey and be happier than she ever would have been with me. Said I'd better hope I never need anything from anyone in their social circle because they were going to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I told him to do whatever he wanted, spread whatever stories he wanted. I'd be happy to show people the Instagram messages and let them decide who was really at fault here. He left without another word. Thursday morning, one day before move-out, Harvey, my property manager, called me. Said he'd done the preliminary walkthrough at Edwin and Nellie's house, and we had serious problems. The unauthorized renovations Carla had mentioned were worse than expected. Nellie had hired contractors to completely gut and remodel the master bathroom without permits or approval. They'd torn out the original tile, replaced the vanity, installed a new shower system. The work wasn't up to code, and now there was a water damage in the subfloor that was going to cost thousands to repair. The kitchen had similar issues. They'd installed new cabinets over the old ones, which sounds fine, except they'd drilled through the original cabinet, backs into the drywall and electrical wiring. One of the drill holes had nicked a wire and created a potential fire hazard. A licensed electrician was going to need to inspect and repair everything. Harvey estimated the total repair costs at around $31,000, way more than their security deposit covered. I told him to document everything with photos and video, get written estimates from contractors, and prepare an itemized bill for Edwin and Nellie. I drove over to the house Thursday afternoon with Harvey. Edwin and Nellie were there packing, surrounded by boxes and furniture. When they saw me walk in with Harvey and a contractor, Nellie immediately started crying. She said they'd only been trying to make the house nicer, that they thought I'd appreciate them taking care of the property. I told her they'd destroyed the property with unauthorized work, showed them the photos Harvey had taken of the bathroom subfloor damage and the kitchen electrical hazards. Edwin said they'd hired licensed contractors for all the work. I asked if he had permits for any of it. He didn't answer. The contractor gave them his preliminary assessment right there in the living room. Said the bathroom alone would be $18,000 to repair properly. The kitchen electrical work would be another $8,000. There were additional issues with the flooring they'd installed in the bedrooms without removing the old carpet first, which had created uneven surfaces and potential tripping hazards. Total bill was going to be at least $31,000, possibly more once they got into the actual work. Nellie completely broke down, started wailing about how they didn't have that kind of money. How were they supposed to pay for repairs and move to a new place at the same time? Edwin was furious, said I was inflating the costs to punish them. I told him he was welcome to get his own estimates from licensed contractors, but they'd probably come back even higher. That's when Yvette showed up. She'd apparently been helping them pack and arrived just in time to hear about the $31,000 repair bill. She immediately started screaming at me about how I was destroying her parents' lives over a stupid engagement party. I told her this had nothing to do with the engagement party anymore. This was about her parents causing serious damage to my property through unauthorized renovations. She said I could afford the repairs, so why was I making such a big deal about it? I asked her if she seriously thought I should just eat $31,000 in damages because her parents decided to remodel my house without permission. She said if I really cared about her, I'd let this go. I reminded her we weren't together anymore and I didn't care what she thought. Edwin tried to negotiate then, said they could make payments on the repair costs if I'd give them time. I told him they had until Friday at 5 p.m. to be completely moved out, and then I'd be pursuing them through small claims court for the damages beyond their security deposit. He said I was being unreasonable. I said I was being a property owner protecting my investment. Carla showed up next. Her brother had apparently gotten wind of the situation and wanted to plead his case one more time. He said if I was going to sue Edwin and Nellie for damages, they definitely couldn't afford to help him with moving costs when his lease expired. He asked if I'd reconsider extending his lease so he wasn't caught in the middle of his family's drama with me. I told him no. He started arguing that it wasn't fair, that he'd tried to stay neutral, that he didn't deserve to be punished. I said life isn't fair and I didn't owe him anything. He called me cold. I said probably. Friday morning, move-out day, I showed up at 9 a.m. with Harvey and a moving truck I'd hired. Edwin and Nellie hadn't finished packing. They had boxes everywhere, but furniture was still in place and their belongings were scattered throughout the house. Nellie was sitting on the couch crying while Edwin was frantically trying to disassemble their bed frame. I told them they had until 5 p.m. and whatever wasn't out by then would be considered abandoned property. Edwin said they needed more time, that Nellie had been too upset to pack properly. I said they'd had 60 days notice plus extensions, This was their problem to solve. Yvette arrived around noon with Harvey, the wealthy college friend, driving his Porsche. They'd apparently been spending the morning looking at apartments together since Edwin and Nellie needed somewhere to stay temporarily. She announced that Harvey had agreed to put her parents up in a hotel for 2 weeks while they found a permanent place. She said this with a smug look, like she was proving something to me. I told her that was generous of Harvey. She said at least someone in her life was willing to help her family. I said I'd helped her family plenty by charging them below market rent for 4 years while they treated me like garbage. She said I'd never let that go, would I? I said no, probably not. Harvey seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. He hung back by his car making phone calls while Yvette directed her parents packing. At one point, he came over and asked if we could talk privately. We walked to the sidewalk and he said he wanted to know if I thought he was making a mistake getting involved with Yvette and her family drama. I told him I couldn't make that decision for him. He said he'd been having doubts since our phone conversation, that some of the things Yvette had said to him about manipulating financial arrangements before leaving me kept playing in his head. He asked if I thought she was capable of doing the same thing to him. I said based on my experience, Yvette makes decisions based on what benefits her most in the moment. If he could provide the lifestyle she wanted, she'd probably be loyal to him as long as that remained true. The second someone better came along or he stopped meeting her expectations, she'd start looking at her options. I told him she's not a bad person. She's just someone who prioritizes security and luxury over emotional connection. Harvey said that was a sad way to live. I agreed. He said he was going to take a step back from the situation and let her deal with her family stuff without him getting more involved. I told him that was probably smart. By 3 p.m., Edwin and Nellie had most of their stuff loaded into a moving truck they'd rented. The house was trashed, though. They'd left damaged furniture, broken picture frames, stains on the carpet that weren't there before. Harvey did another walkthrough and added another $4,000 to the damage estimate for the additional issues. Edwin saw the updated bill and completely lost it. Started yelling about how I was a con artist, how I'd been scamming them for years by hiding my real identity, how he was going to sue me for emotional distress. I told him to get a lawyer and try. He said I'd destroyed his family. I said no. He'd destroyed his own family by raising a daughter to be a gold digger and then publicly humiliating someone who could have been a good son-in-law. That shut him up. At 4:45 p.m., they finally got the last of their stuff out. Edwin threw the keys at my feet instead of handing them to me. Nellie was still crying. Yvette gave me one last look and said I'd regret this. I said I really wouldn't. I watched them drive away in their moving truck, Yvette following behind in her car. Harvey had already left hours earlier. The house was empty and damaged and was going to cost me over $30,000 to repair properly, but I didn't care. The satisfaction of watching them scramble and panic and realize they couldn't manipulate their way out of consequences was worth every penny. I filed the small claims paperwork on Monday. Edwin and Nellie are going to get served with a lawsuit for damages within the next couple weeks. Carla's lease expires in less than 3 months, and I've already started marketing that unit to new tenants. The wedding venue sent me a final confirmation that everything has been canceled. Edwin's credit card was charged the cancellation fees, which were substantial since they were within the 90-day window. He tried to dispute the charges, but the venue told him the contract was clear about cancellation terms. I ran into Ashley, Yvette's friend from the Instagram messages, at a grocery store last week. She saw me and tried to walk the other way, but I caught up to her in the produce section. Asked her if she still thought Yvette's plan to divorce me and take half was funny. She said she had no idea what I was talking about. I said I had the screenshots if she wanted to refresh her memory. She left her cart and walked out of the store. Someone asked in the comments on my last post what I'm going to do with the $47,000 in renovation costs I paid over the years. Truth is, I'm not doing anything. Those were business expenses I approved at the time. What I will get is the $31,000 in damage repairs, or at least whatever the court awards me when Edwin and Nellie inevitably don't pay voluntarily. As for Yvette, last I heard, she and Harvey did not work out. Apparently, once he saw how she and her family operated up close, he backed off completely. She's single now, and according to her Instagram, which I checked one last time out of curiosity, she's living with her parents in whatever temporary place they found while they save up for a new rental. Edwin was right about one thing at that engagement party. I do drive a 2003 car, and I probably always will because it runs perfectly fine and I don't need to prove anything to anyone with an expensive vehicle. The broke loser he talked about? Turns out that broke loser owns 47 properties, runs a successful business, and just taught his whole family a lesson about not judging people based on appearances. I'm done with this situation now. No more updates. No more checking their social media. No more thinking about them at all. They're out of my properties and out of my life. Best decision I ever made was staying quiet at that engagement party and planning my response instead of reacting in the moment. To everyone who followed this story, thanks for the support and the laughs. And to anyone out there who's ever been called a pathetic joke by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, sometimes the best revenge is just being successful and letting them figure out too late that they messed with the wrong person.